I grabbed my car keys from the kitchen counter, already running late. The small battery icon on the fob flashed red dead. Of course, it had to be today. Today of all days when the state labor inspectors were scheduled to visit our company, and as the head of HR, I needed to be there early. I tried prying open the key fob with my nails, but the back cover wouldn't budge. Seriously, I muttered, looking around for a screwdriver. We always had spare batteries in the top drawer of the living room cabinet, at least we used to. I pulled the box out and shuffled through old cables, light bulbs, and random screws. No batteries. None. A knot of frustration twisted in my chest. I didn't have time for this. Maybe Daniel had some in his toolbox on the balcony. He always kept a stash of odds and ends out there. Screwdrivers, wire, duct tape, things he used maybe once a year but swore were essential. I slid open the balcony door, shivering slightly at the sharp morning air. The small cabinet sat in the corner, dusty and jammed with his tools. I yanked open the drawer, and it nearly came off its rails, spilling contents across the floor. Electrical tape, loose screws, a measuring tape, and no batteries. But something else caught my eye. A simple blue notebook, the kind you'd buy in any convenience store, only it didn't belong there. Daniel was not a write-in-a-notebook kind of man. He used apps, notes on his phone, spreadsheets on his laptop. Seeing that little notebook tucked among tools felt strange, out of place. I picked it up, meaning only to move it aside, but curiosity whispered. I hesitated. It's his, I thought. Private. But my eyes betrayed me. The first page was titled, Winter Clothing Kids. Beneath, an itemized list, puffer coats, hats, mittens, thermal underwear, socks, each one neatly checked with quantities next to them. 2 sets of everything. I frowned, flipping another page. Christmas gifts ideas, plush toys, trains, art supplies, Barbie family set, a programmable robot, wireless headphones. Another page showed numbers for a pediatric dentist, a school prep center, and even a private tutor. My breath caught. What is this? These entries went back 5 years, long before Daniel and I married. His first notes predated me entirely. And recently, just days ago, there were more lists. Christmas gifts again, summer clothing, vacation packing lists. A horrible thought flashed like lightning. Daniel had children I didn't know about. A secret family? I tried to reason with myself. Maybe they were for a friend's kids, maybe for charity. But every instinct screamed otherwise. He had never mentioned children, not even once. And yet, these lists were detailed, meticulous, tender in their way. I thought of all those business trips he took every summer, always somewhere coastal, always refusing to take me because it's all work, no free time. Was that true? Or was he taking them? I clutched the notebook, suddenly aware of my breathing. Quick, shallow. Daniel was the most transparent man I had ever known. He smiled easily, helped anyone who asked, always came home on time, never hid his phone or passwords. I trusted him completely. And yet, this notebook felt like another life entirely. I checked my watch. I was supposed to be at work already, meeting the inspectors before anyone else even clocked in. Instead, I was standing barefoot on the balcony, holding evidence. Evidence of what? Exactly, I didn't know yet, but it felt like betrayal. I set the notebook on the kitchen table and sat down, my fingers trembling slightly. I didn't want to read more. I didn't want to invade his privacy further. But the curiosity, the fear, they were stronger than my resolve. I skimmed more pages, each one a punch to the gut. Summer lists with swimsuits, inflatable armbands, sunscreen, little kids' medicine kits with doses carefully noted. I could see him writing these things, thinking ahead, caring for someone. Children. My chest tightened. Daniel knew I couldn't have kids. I told him that before we married, my voice shaking with shame, expecting him to leave. But he didn't. He took my hands, looked me straight in the eye, and said, I love you. We'll make our own kind of family. And yet here it was, his other life, a life with kids that weren't mine. Maybe they weren't even his. But then why keep it a secret? I stared at the notebook, heart pounding. I couldn't wait until tonight. I needed answers now. I called my boss, voice shaky, claiming I was sick. She wasn't happy but agreed to cover for me. Then I placed the notebook right in the center of the table. If he wanted to hide this, he couldn't anymore. I'd wait for him to come home, and finally I'd know the truth. Waiting for Daniel to come home, I couldn't stop staring at that blue notebook on the kitchen table. But my thoughts spiraled far beyond its pages. They drifted back to a life I thought I'd buried long ago. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York where everyone knew everyone, and secrets didn't stay secret for long. My parents raised me to believe in hard work and decency. I wanted to make them proud, to be someone who gave back. That's why I became a teacher. First grade, bright-eyed kids learning how to read and write, tying their shoes, laughing at my silly songs. But the truth? I wasn't cut out for it. I loved the children, but the endless noise, the constant pressure, the heartbreaking stories of kids who came to school hungry, it all ate away at me. I went home every day, exhausted and doubting myself. So, after 3 years, I quit. My parents were surprised, even disappointed. But I told myself it was temporary, that I'd find another way to make a difference. I moved to the city and landed a job in human resources. It was supposed to be stable, professional, safe. And then I met him. He wasn't Daniel. He was someone else, someone who seemed charming at first. We went on a few dates, and I let myself fall too fast. I was lonely, eager to prove I could have a normal life like everyone else. When he said he was separated from his wife, I believed him, or maybe I just wanted to. 2 months later, I found out I was pregnant. The night I told him, expecting shock, but maybe even joy, he laughed. "Amanda, I have a wife and 2 kids. I'm not leaving them. You knew what this was." No, I hadn't known. I'd built my future in my head, and in one sentence he crushed it. I sat in my apartment all night, staring at the walls, my hands over my stomach. I wanted to keep the baby. I wanted to believe I could do it alone. But I was barely surviving paycheck to paycheck, renting a tiny 1-bedroom, no support system in the city. And I couldn't bear the thought of going back to my hometown as the girl who got pregnant by a married man. So I made the hardest decision of my life. The procedure didn't go smoothly. Complications set in, a raging infection, emergency surgery, and then the words from the doctor that hollowed me out completely. "You won't be able to carry children again. I'm sorry." For weeks, I stayed inside, barely eating, crying until I couldn't cry anymore. I hated myself, hated the choices I'd made, hated the silence in that apartment. I promised I'd never let myself be vulnerable like that again. Years later, when I met Daniel, I carried that shame like a stone in my chest. We met at work. He was consulting for our IT department. He had this calm, steady energy, like nothing could shake him. I told him about my infertility before things got serious, expecting him to walk away. But he didn't. He squeezed my hand and said, "Amanda, I'm with you because of who you are, not because of what you can or can't give me." That was the moment I fell in love for real. He made me believe I could still have a family, our own version of it. Pets, maybe adoption someday, or simply each other. I thought we were honest with each other. I thought there were no secrets. And yet that notebook, those names, those lists, that secret life. I glanced at the clock. Daniel wouldn't be home for another 3 hours. My heart thudded like a drum as I tried to distract myself with chores, but I couldn't shake the thought. What if he has children and I never knew? What if he chose me because I can't give him what she did? I pressed my hands to my face, trying to breathe. I had sworn I'd never feel that kind of betrayal again, but here I was, bracing myself for answers I might not be ready to hear. For a moment, I wished I'd never found that notebook at all. The apartment felt unnervingly quiet. No television, no music, not even the hum of the dishwasher I usually left running after dinner. I had turned everything off, as if silence itself could help me think. The blue notebook sat squarely in the middle of the kitchen table, its pages closed but heavy with meaning. I had placed it there deliberately, almost like evidence in plain sight. When Daniel came home, he would see it. He would know I'd read it, and then there would be no turning back. I tried to busy myself. I wiped the counters twice, then rearranged the spice rack, then put it back the way it was. Every few minutes, I found my gaze drifting to the clock. 3:30 p.m., 4:10 p.m., 4:52 p.m. I still had nearly an hour to go before Daniel's shift ended. Part of me wanted to run, to avoid whatever truth waited for me. I could already hear the explanations, ones I wouldn't believe, ones that would only cut deeper. Another part of me wanted to call him right now, demand answers over the phone, rip the bandage off quickly. But I didn't. I waited. My thoughts wouldn't stay still. They kept flashing back to every business trip Daniel had taken over the last 3 years. Trips where he insisted there was no time for me to come along. Trips where he came back looking tired, but oddly softer. Was he spending that time with children? With her children? I stared at my hands on the countertop, remembering how he held them the day I told him I couldn't have kids. "Amanda, that doesn't change how I feel about you," he said back then. I believed him. I still wanted to believe him. But the lists in that notebook, they weren't for charity. They were personal. My phone buzzed. A text. "Daniel, on my way. You okay?" I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Yeah. We need to talk." The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then nothing. No reply. At 5:45, I heard the familiar sound of keys at the door. My heart pounded, so hard it felt like it would break my ribs. I gripped the edge of the counter as Daniel stepped inside, his usual warm smile fading when he saw my face and then the notebook on the table. He froze. For a second, I saw something in his eyes, panic maybe or guilt. He set his bag down slowly, cautiously, like someone approaching a wild animal. "You found it," he said quietly. I nodded, my voice trembling. "Daniel, what is this? These lists, these kids' clothes, toys, dentist numbers, who are they for?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the notebook, his shoulders sagging as if carrying an invisible weight. Then, finally, he met my eyes. "It's a long story," he said softly. "One I should have told you a long time ago." He pulled out a chair and sat down, clasping his hands together. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked older, tired, vulnerable. "Please, Amanda, let me explain." I sank into the chair across from him, my pulse still thundering in my ears. I braced myself, knowing whatever came next would change everything. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he opened the notebook, flipping through pages like they belonged to someone else. He stopped at one and pressed his fingers on it for a moment, almost as if bracing himself. "I should have told you this before we ever got married," he said quietly. "But I didn't because I was afraid you'd see me differently, and because part of me never really believed it would still matter." "Daniel," my voice was softer than I expected. "Just tell me." He took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the table. Her name was Emily Hartman. I met her when I was fresh out of college, working at a coffee shop while I waited for my first IT contract. She was smart, funny, stubborn in the best way, and beautiful. She made me feel like I could do anything. I felt a sting of jealousy, sharp and uninvited, but I stayed quiet. "We dated for almost 2 years," he continued. "But Emily's life wasn't easy. Her grandmother raised her and money was always tight. When her grandmother's health got worse, the medical bills started piling up. I was trying, Amanda. I really was. But I was just a kid with a part-time job and student loans." He exhaled slowly. "She met someone else, a wealthy man, Sergey. He offered to take care of her, to pay for her grandmother's treatment, to give her a life she thought I couldn't." "She married him?" I asked. Daniel nodded. "She did, and it broke me. But I told myself she deserved stability, that maybe he could give her something I couldn't." His voice cracked slightly. "Only it wasn't stability. Sergey was controlling, jealous, and dangerous. For a while, I didn't know. She stopped contacting me after she married him. I figured she was happy. I folded my hands, heart heavy. What happened? 3 years ago, I saw her again by accident, Daniel said, his eyes distant, lost in memory. She was at the grocery store with 2 kids, Liam and Chloe. Her face lit up when she saw me, but then I saw something else in her eyes, fear. That night, she called me. She said Sergey had been hurting her, that she wanted to leave but didn't know how. She begged me not to tell anyone. I covered my mouth, my chest tight. Daniel! She said she'd call again, but she never did. A month later, she was gone. He swallowed hard, staring down at his hands. Sergey killed her, claimed it was an accident during a fight, but the jury didn't buy it. He's serving a life sentence now. And those kids, they were suddenly orphans. Her grandmother was too old to manage them on her own. So you stepped in, I whispered, glancing at the notebook. Yes. He nodded, tears pooling in his eyes. Not as their father, I'm not. But I felt responsible. I couldn't save Emily, Amanda, but I could at least make sure her kids had coats in the winter, toys at Christmas, school supplies. I send money. I visit when I can. I take them on trips during the summer so their grandmother can rest. It's not about guilt anymore, it's about them. Liam and Chloe didn't ask for any of this. I stared at him, my heart torn in two. One part of me understood the compassion, the loyalty. The other part hurt. Hurt because I'd never known, because all those times I'd asked about his summer trips, he'd smiled and said, "Just work." "You should have told me," I said finally, my voice barely a whisper. "I know." He wiped his eyes. "I was scared. I thought maybe you'd see it as betrayal. I didn't want you to think I was living some double life." I looked at the notebook again, then back at him. "Were you still in love with her?" Daniel's gaze met mine, steady despite the tears. "No. I loved her once, yes, but she made her choice and I moved on. I built a life with you because I love you, Amanda. That hasn't changed." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But my chest still ached, filled with questions and insecurities. Why hide it if there was nothing to hide? Why keep those lists secret? "I can't have kids, Daniel." The words slipped out before I could stop them. "You knew that, and you said it didn't matter. But all this time, you were spending summers with someone else's children. Do you have any idea how that feels?" He leaned forward, voice breaking. "Amanda, please, it's not about replacing something I don't have with you. It's about doing what's right for them. I thought protecting you from that past would make things easier, but I see now it just made it worse." The silence between us was heavy, filled with all the things I wanted to say, but couldn't. I closed my eyes, taking a shaky breath. "I need time, Daniel. I need to think." He nodded slowly, pain etched across his face. "Take all the time you need. I'll tell you everything, every detail, if that's what it takes. No more secrets. Just don't give up on us, okay?" I didn't answer right away. My hands were cold, trembling. My life had changed in the span of one conversation, and I wasn't sure yet how to feel about it. After Daniel's confession, the apartment felt colder, as if the truth itself had sucked the warmth out of the room. He sat there silently, eyes on me, waiting for a response that wouldn't come. I finally stood, my legs shaky, and walked into the bedroom. I closed the door and leaned against it, sliding down until I sat on the floor. My hands were trembling, my pulse still pounding like I had just run a marathon. I'd asked for honesty and I got it, but the truth felt heavier than the lie ever had. Emily Hartman. The name echoed in my mind like a ghost. She was dead, and yet she was here in my home, in my marriage, in the way Daniel had kept his summer's secret. She was everywhere, and I hated that I envied a woman who wasn't even alive. I stood and stared at myself in the mirror above the dresser. My eyes were red, my face pale. I whispered to my reflection, "You're being ridiculous, Amanda. He didn't cheat on you. He didn't lie about loving you." My voice cracked. "He just never let you in." That was the part that cut the deepest. Not that he'd helped children who needed him, but that he'd faced it alone, as if I couldn't handle his past, as if I wasn't strong enough to carry it with him. But deep down, I wondered if maybe he was right. Because as soon as I saw those lists, all I could think about was what I couldn't give him. Children, family, the things he clearly cherished enough to keep showing up for, even if they weren't his. I pressed a hand against my stomach, the old wound flaring to life. I remembered that cold clinic room, the smell of antiseptic, the way the doctor looked at me after the surgery. You won't be able to carry children again. I'm sorry. Back then, I thought I'd lost a future. Daniel had been the one who convinced me I still had one, that we could create a life built on love, not biology. I'd believed him. And now I couldn't stop picturing him holding Liam's hand at the beach, Chloe riding on his shoulders. I could see them laughing, bonding, making memories. A family, even if it wasn't legally his, and definitely not mine. I wiped my eyes and stepped out of the bedroom. Daniel was still at the kitchen table, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. He looked up when he heard me. Amanda, his voice was rough. Please say something. I swallowed hard. I don't even know where to start. He stood slowly. Start anywhere. Yell at me. Throw something if you need to. Just don't shut me out. But I couldn't yell. I couldn't even summon anger. Only a dull ache in my chest. You built this entire second life, I said quietly, and you didn't think I should be a part of it. Daniel winced. That's not what I meant. I thought I was sparing you pain. I shook my head. You didn't spare me anything. You made me wonder if I was enough. His face crumpled. Amanda, you are enough. You've always been enough. I love you. Then why didn't you trust me with this? My voice cracked, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. He stepped closer, but I raised a hand, keeping distance between us. I wasn't ready to be touched, not yet. I need space, I whispered. Daniel nodded, slowly, eyes shining. Take it. I'll do whatever you need. Just, please don't give up on us. I turned away, gripping the doorframe for balance, my chest tight. I didn't want to give up. I loved him, but love didn't erase the sting of secrets. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the blue notebook still on the table, like a silent witness. My thoughts swirled with jealousy, grief, and something else I couldn't name. A tiny spark of curiosity about those kids. Liam and Chloe. What did they think of Daniel? Did they love him? Did they call him Dad? And what would they think of me? Sleep never came. Instead, I made a decision I wasn't sure I'd regret. I would meet them. I needed to see for myself what kind of life Daniel had been living without me. The next morning, Daniel hesitated when I told him I wanted to meet them. He searched my face for anger, for bitterness, but all he found was resolve. You don't have to do this, he said softly. I do, I replied. If we're going to move forward, I need to know them. And I need to see for myself what all this means to you. We drove in silence along the coastal road toward Portland. The October air was crisp, the ocean visible beyond stretches of pine and rocky shoreline. I tried to focus on the beauty outside, but my mind kept returning to that blue notebook and all the emotions it had unearthed. Daniel's hand rested on the gearshift, fingers twitching like he wanted to take mine, but wasn't sure if he was allowed. I didn't reach for him. Not yet. When we pulled into a quiet, suburban neighborhood, my stomach tightened. A small white house sat at the end of a narrow street, a garden full of late-blooming mums lining the walkway. On the porch stood an older woman, frail but upright, her silver hair pulled into a neat bun. She waved as we parked. That's Margaret, Daniel said. Emily's grandmother. Margaret smiled as we approached, her eyes kind despite the deep lines of age and grief. Daniel, she greeted warmly before turning to me. And you must be Amanda. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. It's nice to meet you. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and laundry soap. Toys were scattered in a corner of the living room, and crayon drawings covered one wall. A small voice called out from the hallway, "Uncle Daniel!" A boy, Liam, raced into the room, about 6 years old, all energy and bright blue eyes. He wrapped his arms around Daniel's waist. Daniel crouched to hug him, his face softening in a way I'd never seen before. And then a smaller figure peeked from behind the couch. Chloe, 4 years old, curly brown hair framing her round face. She clutched a stuffed rabbit and stared at me with wide, cautious eyes. Daniel smiled gently at her. "Come say hi, Chloe. This is Amanda." For a moment, she hesitated. Then, slowly, she stepped forward, still clutching the rabbit. She looked up at me, her eyes full of quiet uncertainty, and whispered, "Hi." "Hi, Chloe." I knelt so we were eye level. "I love your bunny. What's his name?" Her lips curved in a shy smile. "Mr. Buttons." "That's a perfect name," I said, and something in her face softened. She reached out, small fingers brushing against my hand before slipping into it. It was such a simple gesture, but it pierced straight through my chest. This tiny, hesitant child was letting me in, even just a little. Margaret watched quietly, her hands clasped. "They've been through a lot," she said softly, "but Daniel has been a blessing. I don't know what I'd do without him." I looked at Daniel, who was now listening intently as Liam explained how he'd built a Lego spaceship. He wasn't just helping them out of guilt, he loved these kids. That much was obvious, and for the first time, I didn't feel jealous. I just felt sad. Sad for Emily, for these children, for Daniel who had carried this responsibility alone, and even for myself, because I'd spent so much time fearing the past that I hadn't seen the present clearly. Later, in the backyard, Chloe tugged at my sleeve. "Will you come back?" she asked softly, eyes big and earnest. I blinked back tears. "If it's okay with you, I'd like to." She smiled, and for a moment it felt like something inside me cracked open. Not broken, just open. When we left that afternoon, the car ride was different. Daniel reached for my hand again, and this time I let him hold it. "I'm sorry I kept this from you," he said quietly. I squeezed his hand. "We'll figure it out together." And for the first time since finding that notebook, I actually believed it. The following weeks were quieter between Daniel and me. But it wasn't the silence of distance anymore. It was the kind of silence that comes when you're learning to listen again. We started spending more weekends in Portland, sometimes taking Margaret out for lunch, sometimes just giving her a break while we stayed with the kids. I had expected awkwardness, maybe even resistance, but Liam and Chloe took to me faster than I imagined. The first time Liam called me by name, I felt a strange warmth in my chest. The first time Chloe reached for my hand without hesitation, that warmth deepened. One Saturday morning, we all gathered in Margaret's kitchen to bake cookies. Liam measured flour with too much enthusiasm, covering the counter in white dust, while Chloe carefully placed chocolate chips, one by one, into the bowl. Daniel stood behind me, laughing when I got a smear of dough on my cheek. I caught his smile out of the corner of my eye. It wasn't the guilty, nervous smile he'd worn when I first discovered the notebook. It was soft, grateful, almost relieved. "You're really good with them," he said quietly, his voice carrying something tender. I shrugged, fighting back emotion. I didn't think I would be. I paused, swallowing hard. I thought seeing them would hurt more than it does. But it doesn't, Daniel. It feels right. He reached for my flour-dusted hand and squeezed. "They like you, Amanda, more than you know." Later, as the cookies baked and the house filled with warm, sweet air, Chloe climbed onto my lap with a coloring book. She held up a crayon drawing, for figures standing under a bright sun. One tall man, one older woman, a small girl and a boy. And next to them, a woman with long hair holding the girl's hand. "That's you," Chloe said shyly, pointing to the woman in the drawing. "You're part of our family now." Something inside me broke wide open. I had spent so long believing I could never be a mother, that my chance at family had ended in a sterile clinic years ago. Yet here I was holding a little girl who saw me as hers, and it felt real. Daniel crouched beside us, his hand resting lightly on my back. His voice was low, full of something I couldn't quite name. "Amanda, I know this wasn't the life you pictured. It's not what I pictured either, but maybe this is better." I looked at him, then at Chloe, then at Liam spinning in circles in the living room with a paper airplane, and I knew he was right. This wasn't the family I had imagined, but maybe it was exactly the one I needed. That night, on the drive home, Daniel reached for my hand again, and this time I held on tightly, not because I was afraid of losing him, but because I wanted to hold this moment, this feeling of quiet belonging. For the first time in years, I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel like the woman who couldn't have children or the woman haunted by past mistakes. I felt like someone who had stepped into something bigger than herself, something healing. When we got home, Daniel pulled me into an embrace and whispered, "Thank you for giving them a chance, and for giving me one too." I rested my head on his shoulder and let out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "I'm done running from the past, Daniel. Let's just be here now." And for the first time, I really meant it. Months passed, and what had once felt like an exposed wound slowly became something softer, something I could hold without pain. We visited Liam and Chloe almost every weekend. Sometimes Daniel took them to the park while I stayed back with Margaret, sipping tea as she shared stories of Emily's childhood, the bright, stubborn girl who loved books and hated carrots. Other times, we all piled into the kitchen again to bake, or bundled up to walk along the rocky coast. It wasn't long before the kids began to treat me like I'd always been there. Liam proudly showed me every Lego masterpiece, every drawing from school. Chloe climbed into my lap at story time without hesitation, resting her head on my shoulder as if it had always been her place. The first time she called me Mommy, it wasn't dramatic or planned. She was tired, eyes heavy, as I carried her up the stairs to bed. "Good night, Mommy," she mumbled sleepily, not even realizing what she'd said. I froze, heart swelling so fast it hurt. Daniel saw the look on my face and just smiled softly, his eyes shining. He didn't correct her. Neither did I. On the drive home that night, I turned to Daniel. "I thought I'd lost my chance to be a mom forever," I admitted quietly. "But somehow, I didn't. It just looks different than I imagined." He squeezed my hand, his voice warm and certain. "That's because you didn't lose anything, Amanda. You gained something new." And he was right. The truth is, healing rarely looks like we think it will. Sometimes it isn't about getting back what was lost. It's about finding something unexpected, something you never even knew you needed. I still carry my past with me. The mistakes, the heartbreak, the day a doctor told me I'd never have children of my own. But now, when I think of the future, I don't feel that hollow ache anymore. I feel Liam's small hand slipping into mine. I hear Chloe's giggle as she colors outside the lines. I see Daniel looking at me not with guilt or secrets, but with gratitude and love. This isn't the life I thought I'd have, but it's the one I'm thankful for every single day. So if you're listening to this and you're holding on to an old hurt, afraid you'll never be whole again, maybe the path to healing isn't about going back. Maybe it's about looking forward, about opening your heart to something different, something better. Because sometimes family isn't who you're born to, it's who you choose. And I choose this one.